Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. And let's talk some boxing. So, anyways, for this video, I would love to hear you guys' comments and concerns on this and what you guys think of this upcoming fight because that's exactly what we are going to talk about today. So, I'm assuming that the most of us recognize who Gervonta Tank Davis is. Gervonta Tank Davis has certainly been one of the greater upcoming rising stars in the sport of boxing within the past couple of years. One of Mayweather's boys when it comes down to the overall. Very clearly, in my opinion, is an A-class talent, is an A-class fighter. Has a lot of talent, fun to watch, got a lot of power, slick fighter when it comes down to it. Very interesting fighter to watch. Now, the criticism of Gervonta Tank Davis, in my opinion, for quite a while, and I had this criticism of him as well, is that it didn't seem like he was too serious about facing a lot of the top contenders. And it did seem like, he was talking about Lomachenko there for a little bit. I personally do not think that he was interested in facing Lomachenko there for a little bit, but, that's besides the point now. But when it comes down to it, Gervonta Tank Davis has an upcoming fight. I believe, what is it? Is it June 26th, June 27th? Let's take a look here. June 26th, so here in a couple of months, he has an upcoming fight against this fighter named Mario Barrios, where if you've seen Mario, he's a fighter at the 140-pound division. I believe he's ranked as one of the top 10 140 pounds today, 140-pounders today, in that division. So I just wanted to know, do you guys think that this is an interesting fight? Now, if I really wanted to phrase this in overall a disingenuous way, I could call this a cherry pick if I wanted to, because if you have seen Mario Barrios's a couple of his recent fights or a fight that happened a couple of fights ago. Now his last fight against and if we go to his record here, if we go to Mario Barrios's record, if we go overall to his record, now the last fight that he had against Ryan Carl, easy win, at least from what it looked like, because no offense against Ryan Carl, but Ryan Carl is not necessarily what I would call really even a B-class fighter. But the one fight that I thought that Mario Barrios had a really, really tough time in, at least that I've seen so far from him, is the Akhmedov fight, who was against a Russian fighter. As you can see, he was 7-0 at the time, which is, what was Mario Barrios in? I'm not sure, so that was a couple of fights ago. So he would have been, 25-0 at the, or excuse me, no, 24-0 at that time when it comes down to it. So that's being 7-0 and facing a fighter that's 24-0. That's quite a big task to take on at that point in time in your career. What I noticed in that fight, and I remember that fight just like it was yesterday, it was a very close fight. And, Barrios, of course, ended up getting the unanimous decision. But it was a very, very close fight. And to be honest with you, I just rewatched it recently to see how close I personally thought it was. I scored it a draw. I think rounds 1 to 4, I think I scored for Barrios, with maybe one of those rounds being interchangeable. The rest of the rounds, besides round 12, where Akhmedov kind of made a dumb decision to come a little bit too forward and get knocked down, I think like round 5 to round 11, I gave all to the Russian fighter. And he was beating Barrios because he kept coming forward and he was just able to really wear him down. He was able to hurt him. I mean, really, if you were to take a look at the fight, he was actually beating up Mario Barrios. Now, if I were a part of the LDBC or new media, because we all know the narratives that they love to spread about Canelo Alvarez and, a certain amount of these other fighters with the demographics that they don't like when it comes down to it, I could sit here and tell you, well, you know what? I think that this is a horrible fight. This is a cherry pick. Gervonta Tank Davis is cherry picking this man because I was not overly impressed with him a couple of fights ago. Just like they say with Canelo Alvarez, saying that he's facing the weakest links because he's facing, the fighters at 168 like Caleb Plant and Callum Smith and, Billy Joe Saunders, even though all those guys are A-class fighters. So I could sit here and try to be disingenuous with you guys. But I'm going to try and put a objective and logical spin on this. Do I believe that this is a very good fight? I'm going to say this. I think that Gervonta Tank Davis, going into this fight, should be the favorite. I think that Gervonta Tank Davis is clearly the more skilled fighter than Mario Barrios. I think that Gervonta Tank Davis, even for his size, and to be honest with you, with the weight that Gervonta Tank Davis actually has, who knows? Maybe he actually might be a natural 140-pounder. Now that seems, unrealistic because he's about like 5'5". But when it comes down to the overall Gervonta Tank Davis, he is a pretty big boy. He's certainly one of the bigger 135 pounders. Teofimo Lopez is another one of those guys. Devin Haney is another one of those guys. Ryan Garcia, I'm not necessarily sure where he rehydrates to. Maybe he's around a natural 135 pounder. Lomachenko is a little bit lighter than them, so I assume that he can probably have a little bit of trouble with all those guys, even though he does have a tremendous skill set. So it is what it is. But when it comes down to it, when I take a look at this fight, man, what I'm going to say is this. I think that this is a tough fight. And the reason why I decided to title this video, is this a cherry pick or is this a very tough fight, is because there's been a certain debate about this fight. There's been a certain debate about if this is a cherry pick, if this is a very good fight. Now, once again, if I wanted to spread my own narrative and be disingenuous, I can sit here and try to tell you guys that this is an easy cherry pick if I really wanted to. Because a couple of fights ago, Mario really escaped the fight with his life when it came down to the overall. A fight that he did not look good in at all. A fight that actually for pretty much the whole entire second half of the fight, he was getting beat up in. So it is what it is. But when I do take a look at the matchup, when I take a look overall at what both of them bring to the table, I think that it's a very interesting matchup. I think it's a very intriguing matchup. Excuse me. And when it comes down to it, I might actually get this fight. At first, when I was thinking about it, I wasn't going to get this fight because I didn't think that it was pay-per-view worthy. But this one actually might be worth tuning into, because when I take a look at it, Mario Barrios, even though in my opinion, I don't think that he necessarily is an A-grade fighter when it comes down to it. And he certainly hasn't beat anyone overtly great in his career. I think that he has one very good win over that Akhmedov fighter, that one Russian, who I think had a decent Olympic background, I believe. But when it comes down to the overall, it is an interesting fight. And the reason why is because this is going to kind of tell me how Gervonta Tank Davis is going to handle the possible 140-pound division. That's really how it's going to tell me there. Of course, Gervonta Tank Davis maybe could have taken one of the elite fights at 135. And once again, if I wanted to sit here and be disingenuous, I could basically say, oh, well, why isn't he calling out a certain amount of these 135-pounders, these elite fighters, all this other stuff? But this is a good fight. I think it is a good fight when it comes down to the overall. Mario Barrios is going to have about a 3.5 to 4 inch reach advantage over Gervonta Tank Davis. He's going to be about 5 inches taller. And Barrios, when it comes to him, if you've seen him in some of his fights, he may look like a pressure fighter. But when I've seen him in some of his more tough fights, he actually seems to be a little bit more on the back foot, work off his jab, and he does have pretty decent counters. He doesn't have bad power at all. As you can see right here, 26 wins, undefeated, 17 knockouts. So 65% KO percentage, that's certainly not bad at all. So when it comes down to it, I think actually this is a very decent fight. I think it is a decent fight. I do give Gervonta Tank Davis a certain amount of props for taking this fight, because this is a decently dangerous fight. Now the question is where is this going to lead to if Gervonta Tank Davis is able to win this fight? Obviously, if he loses this fight, I don't see Gervonta Tank Davis ever going back up to 140 pounds again. But if he wins this, what is it going to lead to? Because is Gervonta Tank Davis really, focused on possibly going up to 140 and facing the guys at 140? We'll just have to see how he looks, because I remember it was a while ago, but, Gervonta Tank Davis, he called out Josh Taylor, or, quote unquote called him out. He basically said that he would knock him out. And Gervonta Tank Davis, he's kind of a little bit like Jamal Charlo in certain regards, and I've criticized Jamal Charlo quite a bit. He kind of calls out certain fighters, and then once they confront him on it, he kind of backs down. He can tend to be like that. But Gervonta Tank Davis, in his last fight against Leo Santa Cruz, I thought that it was a very close fight. I thought that it was very competitive. Obviously, until he knocked him out, I believe in the 6th round, it was a decently close fight. But I thought Gervonta Tank Davis looked good in some of those rounds. But he did look overwhelmed. And Leo Santa Cruz, in my opinion, is no higher than a natural 130-pounder. I think Leo Santa Cruz is around a natural 130-pounder. Mario Barrios seems like a natural 140-pounder, especially, obviously, because he's going to be a little bit taller. He's going to be the one having the longer reach. This is going to be an interesting fight, man. Mario does not seem like a fighter that, is just a straightforward fighter that overall just goes in there and tries to blitz you. He can box a little bit on the outside. I'm not saying that he's A-grade at it. I'm not saying that he's an A-grade talented boxer, but he is decently talented. He actually is a decently dangerous opponent, and his power, when I take a look at it, could possibly hurt Gervonta Tank Davis. This is a, both of their power could potentially hurt each other. Personally, if you had to give me an early prediction, I would say that Gervonta Tank Davis most likely wins this one by unanimous decision or split decision, something like that. But, when I just rewatched that, recent Akhmedov fight and a couple of other fights of Mario Barrios, I'm actually decent excited to watch this fight because I do think Mario, he didn't look overly impressive in that Russian fight against Akhmedov. But Gervonta Tank Davis, even though obviously I think he's more talented than an Akhmedov, he does not necessarily have the length or the heights or who knows, possibly some other things to maybe compete with them. And we've also seen Gervonta Tank Davis in a couple of fights where stamina could possibly be an issue. So this really is going to tell me how well Gervonta Tank Davis could do at a 140 pounds fight. Because personally, if you had to ask me, do I see Gervonta Tank Davis beating a Regis Prograis or a Josh Taylor or Jose Ramirez? It's hard to see that personally. But when it comes down to the overall, I think this is kind of the perfect fight to tell us. Now, if he loses this fight, where does he go from here? I think obviously he goes right back down to the 135-pound division. Who does he fight from there? That's the big question. You got Devin Haney there. You got Ryan Garcia. Obviously, you got Vasily Lomachenko, Teofimo Lopez. We'll see who he can get there. All of the lightweights, I don't think anyone besides Gervonta Tank Davis, I don't think is with the PBC. So who knows if, he can even get any of those fights. I don't know. But we'll see what happens. Or if he's serious about taking those fights, because there has been some fights that I believe that Gervonta Tank Davis has not always been serious about taking. But I'll approach that when the time comes if I feel that he is doing that again. So we'll see what happens. But when it comes down to the overall, I think this is a good fight. I think it actually is a very potentially dangerous fight. We'll see what happens. I got to give props for Gervonta Tank Davis for actually taking this fight. The way that I remember Mario Barrios, I didn't think he was really that talented. But when I take a look at a couple of his recent fights, I do believe actually that he is decently talented. I think that this is a good fight. I'm going to favor Gervonta Tank Davis in this fight. But I think actually, to be honest with you guys, this is a fight that is worth tuning in. I'm going to say that this is not a cherry pick. There's a certain amount of people that were debating if it was. In my opinion, no. I think that it's a real deal. Mario Barrios, he can box a little bit. Once again, I'm not saying that he's A grade. This is a fight to where, I think that if he's able to dominate Barrios, at least dominantly, it's going to look impressive, especially if you were able to stop him. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happened because one negative I will say about Mario Barrios, especially that I've seen in the Akhmedov fight, and maybe it was just for that fight, I don't know, he does seem to tend to slow down a little bit in the middle rounds when it comes down to the overall, and he seems to be more hittable, maybe even run a little bit out of steam. So we'll see what happens. I don't know, but when it comes down to it, man, to be honest, I still think that this is a good fight. I still think that it's a fight worth tuning into. I think I'm going to tune in for this fight. I think it's going to be, a decent fight. If Gervonta Tank Davis were to clearly win this fight, then I think I'd have to give him a lot of credit. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.